Hello Army, this is Jin. I'm so happy to be with you today. Before we start, I want to know one thing. Where are you watching from? Leave your country or city in the comments so we can all feel closer as a family. I never thought I would ever share something this personal with the world. I've always believed that some parts of my heart should remain behind the curtain, protected from the noise and chaos that fame brings. But tonight, I can't keep it hidden anymore. Maybe this is not just my story, it's also a reflection of how fragile love, friendship, and trust can be when the spotlight never stops shining on you. There's a reason why I cried that day. Many people saw the photos, the clips, the headlines that exploded across social media. Some said I was crying because of exhaustion, others said it was because of joy. None of that was true. The truth is much more painful than anyone could imagine. That day, I found out that the person Jungkook married was the woman I once called my girlfriend. I remember the moment so vividly that it haunts me even now. I was standing backstage, surrounded by lights, stylists, and staff moving in every direction. My phone vibrated again and again with messages I didn't want to read. Every notification carried the same unbearable truth. I opened one article, and there was a photo of Jungkook in his wedding suit, standing next to her. My heart stopped. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. It wasn't anger that hit me first. It was disbelief. I thought maybe it was a rumor, maybe it was just the internet being cruel. But then I saw the video, I saw her smile. I knew that smile used to belong to me. I watched her eyes light up as Jungkook placed a ring on her finger. My knees went weak, and I had to lean against the wall just to stay standing. People think idols are untouchable, that we live in a world where everything sparkles and every heartbreak fades behind makeup and lights. But we're still human, and that night, I wasn't BTS's Jin. I was just Kim Seokjin, a man who realized that love can disappear in silence and reappear in someone else's arms. I remember the days when she used to wait for me after rehearsals. She'd bring me coffee, the same one I drink every morning now, just to feel close to her again. She used to tell me that she understood my life, that she'd never leave even when things got hard. I believed her. I trusted her with parts of my life that no one else knew. And yet, somehow, while I was on stage performing for millions, she found comfort in someone else, someone I called my brother. When I finally faced Jungkook after the news broke, there was this unbearable silence between us. He didn't say much. He just looked at me, guilt in his eyes, and whispered, "Hyung, I didn't mean for this to happen." I wanted to yell, to ask him how it could happen, but no words came out. I just stared at him, realizing that sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those who sit right next to you, laugh with you, sing with you, and share your dreams. That night, when the cameras turned off and the audience was gone, I sat alone in my dressing room. The tears wouldn't stop. I didn't want anyone to see me like that, but pain doesn't wait for permission. It just floods in. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. I heard their laughter, and it broke me again and again. Some people might say, "Jin, you're strong, you'll move on." But strength doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means surviving it. It means facing the world even when your heart has shattered into pieces that no one can see. I'm not telling this story to make anyone the villain. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was just a cruel coincidence. But I can't deny what I felt, the loneliness, the confusion, the sense of being replaced by someone who was supposed to protect me. I cried not because I lost her, but because I lost both of them, her love and his trust. That's the truth behind my tears. The world saw Jin, the idol, crying. But behind those tears was Kim Seokjin, the man who realized that no amount of fame could protect him from heartbreak. I wanted to disappear that night, to shut everything down. But I knew Army was watching, waiting for me to smile. So I did. I smiled through the pain, the way I always do. As I stood on stage again the next day, I looked out at the sea of purple light, and I whispered silently to myself, "You can't break down here." Not in front of them. But deep down, something inside me had already broken. This is only the beginning of the story. In the next part, I'll tell you what happened after that day. The conversations, the confrontation, and the moment I finally understood why it all happened. Because sometimes love isn't about who you hold, it's about who you let go. After that day, everything around me felt different. The laughter in the practice room no longer sounded the same. Every time I looked at Jungkook, I saw a memory that used to belong to me, playing behind his eyes like a movie I could never stop watching. It was painful, not because I hated him, but because I didn't know how to face him anymore. I remember the morning after the news broke. The members gathered at the dorm for breakfast, just like we always did. The table was quiet. No one dared to mention the obvious. The sound of chopsticks hitting the bowl echoed like thunder in my head. Jungkook was sitting across from me. His eyes were red, and his hands trembled slightly as he held his spoon. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Every second felt like a reminder of everything we'd lost, not just love, but the fragile trust that had kept us together for years. When the others finally left the room, it was just the two of us. The silence was unbearable. Then Jungkook spoke first. His voice was soft, trembling, filled with guilt. "Hyung, I didn't plan this. It just happened." I remember staring at him for a long time before answering. "You think love just happens like that? Without anyone getting hurt?" He looked down. I could see the regret in his expression, but regret couldn't fix what was already broken. I wanted to yell, to release the storm that had been building inside me. But the words got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. Instead, I whispered, "I trusted you." He didn't respond. Maybe he didn't know how to. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we could have had. For the first time since our debut, we weren't brothers on the same path. We were strangers standing in the same room, separated by something we couldn't undo. That day, I went to the studio to clear my head. Music has always been my escape. I turned off my phone, sat in front of the piano, and just played whatever came to my heart. Every note sounded like a confession I couldn't say out loud. I didn't notice when Namjoon walked in. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, listening quietly. Then, after a while, he said, "You don't have to carry this alone." But how could I not? When the world expected me to smile, to joke, to be worldwide handsome, how could I let anyone see the broken version of myself? I laughed a little, wiped my face and said, "I'm fine, June. I'm just tired." It was a lie, and he knew it. Still, he didn't push. He just sat next to me, letting the silence speak for both of us. Later that night, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. There were so many of her, smiling, laughing, making silly faces. And then, mixed in between, photos of all of us as BTS, celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, moments that used to mean everything. I stared at one picture, Jungkook's arm around me during a concert, both of us laughing uncontrollably. That photo used to symbolize brotherhood. Now, it hurt just to look at it. I didn't want to hate him. Hate would have been easier, but I couldn't. He was still my brother, the kid I watched grow up, the voice that harmonized with mine through 1,000 songs. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't erase the image of him standing beside her in that wedding photo. Days turned into weeks, and I started avoiding him. We rehearsed separately whenever possible. When we were on stage, I learned to look past him, to focus on the crowd instead. The fans noticed something was off. They always do. They sent messages, comments, asking if everything was okay. I smiled in interviews and told them everything was perfect. But the truth was, perfection had cracked. At night, when the lights went out, I replayed everything in my head the moment I met her, the promises we made, the quiet nights we shared after long schedules. I wondered if she ever thought about me before saying, "I do." Did she hesitate? Did she remember the sound of my voice calling her name? Or had she already erased me completely? There were times I thought about calling her, asking for an explanation. But what would that change? She made her choice. And so did I, choosing silence over chaos, choosing to protect what little peace I had left. Because if I spoke, everything we built as BTS might shatter, and I couldn't let that happen. not because of me. So I stayed quiet. I smiled for the cameras, I laughed for the fans, I pretended everything was fine, but inside, it felt like I was walking through fire every day. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was losing the sense of safety that our group once had, the belief that we'd always have each other's backs, no matter what. I think Jungkook knew that too. Sometimes, I'd catch him looking at me during rehearsals, his expression filled with regret. He'd try to talk, but I'd walk away before he could. It wasn't out of cruelty, it was because I didn't trust myself to hold it together if I heard his voice again. Weeks later, I got an invitation in the mail. It was their wedding reception. I don't know why they sent it. Maybe out of formality, maybe out of guilt. I held that envelope for a long time, staring at their names written in gold. My hands shook as I tore it in half and dropped it into the trash. That moment felt like a quiet goodbye to both of them. I didn't attend the wedding, but I saw clips online. I saw them dance. I saw their smiles. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I just sat there in silence, realizing that maybe this pain wasn't meant to destroy me. It was meant to remind me that I could survive anything, even this. The next morning, I wrote a song. Not about love, not about loss, but about acceptance. Because even though everything felt heavy, I knew someday I'd have to forgive them, not for their sake, but for mine. In part 3, I'll tell you about the song that came out of that pain, and how music became the only way I could breathe again, when words and friendship had already failed me. When the pain becomes too heavy for words, I turn to music. That's always been my escape, the one place where I can be completely honest without having to say anything out loud. After the wedding, after the tears, after the silence between me and Jungkook became something too thick to breathe through, I sat alone in my studio for days. The walls around me felt cold, but the piano was warm, waiting, like it knew I was ready to talk, not with words, but with sound. The first note I played was shaky, trembling just like my hands. I didn't know what I was writing at first. I just let my fingers move, letting every emotion pour out: anger, regret, confusion, love that still lingered like smoke in my chest. The melody that came out wasn't perfect. It was raw, broken, almost hesitant. But it was real. It was me. I spent hours there, replaying the same chords, whispering fragments of lyrics under my breath. Every line was a confession I could never say to their faces. You took my light, but I still see your shadow. Love didn't end, it just changed its name. Words that came straight from the part of me I kept locked away. I didn't write the song to make anyone feel guilty. I wrote it because I needed to remember that even in heartbreak I could still create something beautiful. Sometimes the members would pass by the studio. Taeyoung peeked in once, quietly watching as I played. He didn't say a word, just placed a cup of tea beside me and left. That small gesture meant more than anything. It reminded me that even when trust fades in one place, kindness still exists in another. The song slowly took shape over weeks. I recorded demo after demo, erasing some parts, rewriting others. The hardest part was when I reached the bridge. That's where the truth always hides. I remember pausing for a long time before I finally whispered into the mic, "I forgive you." Those words broke me all over again, but they also set me free. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means releasing yourself from the weight of the pain. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life resenting Jungkook. I didn't want to hold on to anger that would eventually destroy both of us. We were still brothers, even if the bond had changed. One evening, I called Namjoon to the studio. I asked him to listen, not as a leader, not as a producer, but as a friend. When the song ended, he sat quietly for a long moment. Then he said softly, "This isn't just your story, Young. It's everyone's story. Anyone who's ever loved and lost will feel this." Hearing that made me realize something: my pain had a purpose. If my heartbreak could help someone else heal, then it wasn't for nothing. I titled the song Shadow of You. I never released it publicly. It's still saved in a private folder on my computer, untouched. Maybe one day I'll share it. Maybe I won't. But that song saved me. Every lyric, every chord, every silent tear that fell between takes helped me find myself again. There was a night when I almost deleted it. I was scared that if Jungkook ever heard it, he'd understand exactly who it was about. But instead of deleting it, I played it one last time. This time, imagining ARMY, listening. I pictured them, lights in their hands, smiling, crying, feeling the same emotions I once did. And I realized I wasn't alone. I never was. Music connects hearts, even when they're broken. That's the strange thing about love. It leaves scars, but it also gives you songs. And those songs become a way to survive the things you can't change. After finishing Shadow of You, I took a deep breath for the first time in weeks. I walked outside the studio and felt the cold night air against my face. Seoul was quiet, stars scattered above me. I whispered to the sky, "I'll be okay." It wasn't a promise to anyone else, it was a promise to myself. In the days that followed, things slowly started to shift. Jungkook tried to approach me again carefully, respectfully. He didn't ask for forgiveness. Maybe he knew I wasn't ready yet. But he did something that caught me off guard. He left a small USB drive on my desk. Inside was a recording of his voice singing one of my old songs, Epiphany. I listened to it, and halfway through I broke down again. 'Cause that song, my song, was about self-love. Hearing Jungkook sing, it felt like a message. Not an apology, but an understanding. It was as if he was telling me, "Hyung, I know I hurt you, but I still respect you." That night, for the first time in a long while, I smiled genuinely. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something that happened all at once. Maybe it was a slow process, like a melody finding its rhythm again after being lost. I realized that no matter how painful everything was, I couldn't lose myself in that pain. I had to keep going, for the music, for ARMY, and even for the memories that once hurt me. Because love, even when it breaks, teaches you how to grow. In part 4, I'll tell you about the day I faced Jungkook again on stage. The moment when our eyes met in front of thousands of fans. And I realized that sometimes the stage doesn't just hold music, it holds forgiveness too. There's a certain kind of silence that exists only right before a concert begins. The crowd is screaming, the lights are flashing, and yet, behind the curtain, all you can hear is your own heartbeat. That night in Tokyo, mine was louder than ever. Because for the first time since everything happened, I was about to share the same stage with Jungkook again. It had been months since the wedding. Months since I saw him up close. Not just as a bandmate, but as the person who once stood between my pain and my healing. The world didn't know what had happened between us. ARMY cheered, as if everything was the same, as if nothing had changed. But I knew, and he knew, every song, every lyric that night felt heavier than usual. As the intro began, I took a deep breath and walked out under the blinding lights. The roar of thousands of voices hit me like a wave. Purple oceans stretched endlessly in front of me, beautiful, overwhelming, and comforting all at once. I smiled, but behind that smile, my chest tightened. I wasn't ready, but the show had to go on. It always does. When I turned my head slightly, there he was, Jungkook, standing at the far end of the stage, holding his mic, eyes locked on me. For a second, the world around us disappeared. It felt like time had stopped, leaving only two people standing in the middle of something too big for words. He nodded slightly, a silent greeting. I looked back, my lips forming a faint, almost invisible smile. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was something close. We started singing. The first few songs went smoothly, but when the intro to Epiphany began my song, I felt the air shift. Jungkook looked down, and I could see his hands trembling. He knew what this song meant. He knew it carried all my pain, all my healing, and yet there he was, about to harmonize with me again, like nothing had ever gone wrong. I began singing the opening lines. I'm the one I should love in this world. The words felt heavier than ever before. As I sang, flashes of memories filled my mind, her laughter, Jungkook's apology, the night I wrote Shadow of You. My voice cracked slightly on the second verse, and I turned my face away from the camera, hoping no one noticed. But ARMY always does. Halfway through the song, Jungkook joined in. his voice blending with mine. For the first time, it didn't hurt. It was strange, almost peaceful. Our voices met in harmony, and in that moment, I realized something. The music didn't belong to our pain. It belonged to the audience, to the love that BTS had built together long before heartbreak tried to tear it apart. When the final note faded, I bowed my head and whispered into the mic, "Thank you." The crowd screamed, but I wasn't thanking them, I was thanking myself for surviving. During the encore, as the others ran across the stage, throwing confetti and waving at fans, I stood still for a moment, watching Jungkook laugh with Jimin. He looked so young again, like the boy I first met years ago, full of dreams and innocence. And for the first time, since everything happened, I didn't feel bitterness. I just felt tired, but free. After the concert, backstage was filled with the usual chaos, stylists, crew, managers. I sat quietly in the corner, wiping sweat from my face when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, and it was him, Jungkook. He didn't say anything at first. He just held out a small folded paper. I hesitated before taking it. When I opened it, the words were simple. "Hyung, I'll always be sorry, but thank you for still standing next to me." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened, and for a few seconds I couldn't speak. Then, without even realizing it, I smiled and nodded. That was it. No grand speech, no dramatic hug, just a quiet exchange of understanding between two people who had already lost too much to lose each other again. That night, when I got back to the hotel, I replayed a clip from the concert. There was a moment I hadn't noticed right before Epiphany ended. Jungkook had looked at me, eyes glistening, as if he was about to cry. I paused the video and stared at the screen. For the first time, I saw not the person who hurt me, but the person who was hurting too. Pain changes people, but forgiveness frees them. Maybe that's what growing up means, realizing that love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go without hate. As I lay in bed, I whispered to myself, "You did it, Jin. You faced it." And somehow, that night, I slept peacefully. But the story didn't end there. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened, something that reopened old wounds in a way I didn't expect. Because sometimes, even when you think you've healed, life finds a way to test you again. In part 5, I'll tell you about that moment, the one that made me cry again. Not because of betrayal, but because of something much deeper, truth I wasn't ready to face. It had been weeks since that concert in Tokyo, weeks since I stood face to face with Jungkook on stage, since we both pretended everything was fine under the bright lights. For a while, it actually felt like things were getting better. The air between us was no longer thick with silence. We spoke again, carefully, as if rebuilding something fragile that could break with a single wrong word. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, the storm had finally passed. But peace doesn't always last. Sometimes life waits for the moment you start to breathe again, before reminding you that some wounds run deeper than you think. That reminder came one night in Seoul. I had just finished recording a new song. It wasn't about her or about Jungkook, it was about me. It was about learning to stand alone again. The song was called Moonlight Behind Me, and it was supposed to close a painful chapter. I was proud of it. It felt like healing. When I got home that evening, I turned on the TV absent-mindedly, flipping through channels until one headline froze me in place. It was a live interview, Jungkook and his wife sitting side by side, smiling. The screen flashed their names together in bold letters. My heart sank. I didn't expect it to hurt. Not after everything, but it did. She was talking about their relationship, her voice calm and confident. "We didn't expect it either," she said. "It just happened naturally. Jungkook and I were close friends for years before we realized we had something more." I turned the volume down, but my mind kept replaying her words. Close friends for years. That meant it started while I was still there, while she was still with me. It wasn't after, it was during. I felt my chest tighten, my breath growing shallow. I wanted to turn it off, but I couldn't. I needed to hear it, even if it broke me again. Jungkook stayed mostly silent during the interview, nodding along, holding her hand. At one point, the host asked him, "Do you ever regret anything about how it all started?" He hesitated just a second, but I caught it. Then he smiled faintly and said, "Regret? Maybe about the timing, but not about love. I think love chooses us, not the other way around." That sentence pierced through me like a blade. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. I could see in his eyes that he truly meant it. And maybe that was what hurt the most, realizing that they weren't a mistake, they were real, they loved each other. And I was just a chapter they'd both turned the page from. The tears came before I even realized it. I wasn't sobbing loudly. It was quieter than that. The kind of crying that feels more like an ache deep inside your chest. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and laughed bitterly. "You said you forgave them, Jin," I whispered to myself. "So why are you still crying?" I didn't have an answer. Maybe forgiveness doesn't erase the memory of love. Maybe it just allows you to live with it without breaking every day. But that night, I broke again. And this time, there was no stage, no music, no cameras, just me in the dark, finally letting myself feel everything I tried to bury. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jungkook, just one line. "Young, I know you saw it. I didn't want you to find out that way." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "It's fine, Jungkook. I already knew. Maybe I just didn't want to believe it." He replied almost immediately. "You were the one who taught me how to love sincerely. I hope you know that." I didn't respond after that. What could I say? The truth was, I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't hate her either. But knowing that something so pure had started in a shadow that used to belong to me, that was the part I couldn't shake off. The next morning, I went to the studio again. The sun was rising, casting a soft glow through the glass windows. I sat at the piano and played Epiphany. My fingers trembled on the keys, but I kept going. Halfway through, my voice cracked, and I finally let the tears fall freely. That's when I realized something I hadn't. Before all this time, I had been crying for the past, for the version of me who still believed that love could be protected by loyalty. For the version of me who thought being kind would shield me from pain. But life doesn't work that way. Love, friendship, heartbreak, they all coexist in the same space. Sometimes they collide, sometimes they destroy each other. And yet, somehow, we keep going. When I finished the song, I whispered softly into the empty studio, "Thank you for loving me once." It wasn't to her. It wasn't to Jungkook. It was to the memory, the part of my life that, no matter how painful, still made me who I am. That night was the last time I cried for them. Not because the pain disappeared, but because I finally accepted that it was part of my story. A story that would live in my songs, my voice, and my silence. In part 6, I'll tell you about what happened when I decided to release Moonlight Behind Me, how that one song changed everything, even for Jungkook, and how it turned our pain into something that connected us again in the most unexpected way. I sat in the corner of my room, lights dimmed, phone turned face down on the table. The world outside didn't exist anymore. For days, I had refused to go online, refused to open messages, refused to read the words that I knew were waiting for me, words that would break me again and again. My mind replayed that single image of Jungkook standing at the altar, smiling at the woman who once said she loved me. I tried to convince myself it was a misunderstanding, a dream, a scene from a movie that somehow slipped into my real life. But the truth was too loud, too vivid, too sharp. The sound of their laughter, the way he looked at her, the way she held his hand. It wasn't a scene from fiction. It was my reality. I wanted to call Jungkook. I wanted to scream at him, to demand an explanation. But every time I reached for the phone, my hand froze. What could I even say? Why did you marry her? Did you ever think about how I'd feel? Those questions felt pointless now. The decision had been made, the vows had been spoken, and I was left behind once again as someone watching life happen to others while I stood still. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen, my lips trembling. I thought about the fans, about you, ARMY. How could I tell you this story without breaking your hearts too? You've seen me smile through every hardship, laugh through every tear, and keep shining no matter how dark it gets. But this time, it wasn't about an image or a stage performance. This was my real life unraveling. When I first met her, I never imagined she would become the center of my world. I didn't plan for it. I just fell slowly, deeply, helplessly. And she had told me that she loved me for who I was before Jin of BTS ever existed. That's what made it real. That's what made it hurt so much more now. Because when she chose Jungkook, it wasn't fame or fortune she went for. It was someone I called my brother. I remember the day she met him. It was during one of our rehearsals. She brought snacks for everyone, smiled shyly at the members, and laughed at Jungkook's playful jokes. I didn't think much of it then. Jungkook was always the kind one, the playful one, the person who could make anyone feel comfortable. But that comfort grew into connection, and that connection became something I never expected to witness love that wasn't meant for me anymore. That night, I went to the studio, not to sing but to scream, to release the pain in a place that understood me best. I turned off the lights, sat at the piano, and pressed the keys like I was carving my emotions into sound. The melody that came out was slow, broken, fragile. Every note felt like a confession. Every pause felt like a tear. I whispered into the darkness, was I not enough? And for the first time in my life, there was no echo, no answer, no comfort, just silence. I thought of Jungkook again. I remembered how many times we had shared the stage, shared laughter, shared secrets. I remembered the night he told me, "Hyung, you're the reason I keep going." And now, I wondered, was I also the reason he felt the need to hide? Was I too blind to see it coming? Maybe love was never meant to be owned. Maybe it was only meant to be felt, experienced, and then released. But even knowing that didn't make the pain any easier to bear. In that moment, I realized something cruel about love. It doesn't ask for permission before leaving. It doesn't explain itself before shattering your heart. It just walks away, leaving you with pieces sharp enough to remind you of what was once whole. I wanted to hate Jungkook. I wanted to blame him, but deep down I couldn't. Because even in this pain, I still saw the same boy I had watched grow from a shy trainee into a man who could move the world. I couldn't